Yeah, thanks to everyone for joining us today. And for those of you online, thank you for being a part of the discussion today. This is a really great topic. And I just wanted to introduce myself first, and then I'll turn it over to the Midwest Dairy folks. But yeah, I'm Sean Haig, Executive Director with the AI Climate Institute. Our institute is a national AI institute that started on June 1st, 2023. So we're just into our second year. And the focus of our institute is on the intersection of AI, artificial intelligence, with climate smart agriculture and forestry. And so this is a really sort of our first discussion to bring in some farmers and folks that really work in the fields and kind of tie the connection with our researchers and others in this sort of agriculture and forestry community to hear from you and understand how things are working on the farms and kind of start that dialogue as part of AI Climate and of course with Midwest Dairy. So just again wanted to welcome everyone. Thanks for being here and we look forward to the discussion today. So I think I'm going to turn over to Lisa. She's going to run through the agenda and introduce our speakers, panelists.
Thank you all for coming. So as you can see, we've already started into the agenda, but we'll just do some quick introductions here, and everyone has lunch, so we do have a few extra probably at the end. But so thank you for joining us, and just want to kind of introduce, and then at 11:45, hopefully that we'll be done with that, and then we have a good half-hour sharing, so we'll have each of our dairy farmers have about 10 minutes to just share some top-line information about their farm and kind of some of the challenges they might have in various areas or things they're doing. And then we'll have Shannon will kind of moderate for the rest of the time to answer questions. So our goal really, like Sean said, was just to have open dialogue and just be able to ask questions and share and learn more from each other. So, and hopefully help as things kind of go along. So, my name is Lisa McCann. I'm actually a registered dietitian, and I've been with Midwest Dairy and part of the Dairy Checkoff now for 17 years. I don't know where that time went, but it's been a while. But I'm actually, my title these days is Sustainable Nutrition Manager. I actually graduated from the university quite a long time ago as a dietitian, food science and nutrition. So my work all through the 17 years, even though I've changed, the audience has changed, it's always about sharing the dairy farmer's story and their commitment to animal care, their commitment to produce a nutritious product. So the partners may change, but the message has really been consistent. So kind of really excited to get more into the sustainability space and really talk about what farmers are doing, their commitment, and how, it all relates to food systems, and it, just really talk about all of those different things. So I'm really excited that you are here. Shannon, do you want to quick introduce yourself, and then I'll go just give a little overview of who Midwest Dairy is, just to ground all of us.
Hi, everybody. I am Shannon Watron. I am Farm Relations Program Manager for Midwest Dairy. I've been there for about 8 years now. But also related to this, I am married to and actively dairy farming with my husband up in Pine County, so about an hour and 10 minutes north of here. So as I'm moderating today, if you've got questions, I will. No such thing as a silly question by any means. These guys are very well versed in answering those questions, and I'm excited to navigate that discussion with you.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. So I kind of thought I would just ground Midwest Dairy. We work on behalf of dairy farmers across 10 states, and you can kind of see that we represent 4,000 dairy farm families. Shannon and I specifically work in Minnesota, but we have counterparts in all of the other states. So our farmers produce 24 billion pounds of milk annually, which is 11% of U.S. milk production. We have 41 million consumers and close to 1,800 dairy farm families in Minnesota. So that was current as of a month and a half ago, so that might have changed, but it's pretty close to that. So, but I think just we are part of the Dairy Checkoff, which means that 15 cents for every pound these farmers produce goes to national. They keep 5%, 10% goes locally for us to do promotion, to boost sales, to increase trust. And so those are main two things that we work. So I thank you for employing me for the last 17 years working on your behalf. So so just to kind of ground, we're under USDA jurisdiction, and I've loved that piece over the years because I feel very confident, especially when I'm talking nutrition or talking to various thought leaders that everything we do and say is grounded in science. So and working with you here, most of you are researchers and work in that space, and you can appreciate that. So that's just a little bit about the checkoff, and just kind of wanted to, again, ground people because not everyone understands. We just assume people understand, oh, checkoff, and not everyone understands that. So I think next is we're going to introduce. So I thought we have Eric Sonic here, then we have Megan Schrupp, and then Margaret Johnson. So they're each going to speak, like I said, for about 10 minutes and just give us a sense of their farm, and they have just kind of a story picture that they can base that off of. And then after each of them talk for about 10 minutes, then Shannon will start moderating. We did have a few people who had submitted pre-questions, so we wanted to make sure that we answered, some of those questions that people had. But I think as they talk, you will probably also generate some additional questions. So again, our goal today is just to have some great, honest dialogue and really, really share. So again, thanks for coming. So Eric, you're up.
Okay. Does it go on its own, or where's my clicker? Okay. Yes, thank you very much, Lisa. I'm Eric Sonic. I'm from up by St. Cloud, Minnesota, a small town called Forston. Graduated with 100 kids from Malacca, small town. We are 20 minutes from St. Cloud and about an hour and 5 minutes to here. So straight up Highway 169. Going through, there's some pictures. My grandpa in the upper left-hand corner there, he moved up to my area from Mankato area. Used to own an elevator down there, and then they decided to go and become dairy farmers. So him and my grandma moved them and 8 kids, and we started dairy farming with 3 Guernsey cows and some pigs, and we got rid of the Guernseys real fast and got to something a little more what we wanted. That's my dad, and then myself in the first picture. The upper right-hand corner, my brother and I both graduated from the University of Minnesota. Shannon earlier tried to tell me where the bathrooms were in here, and I'm like, I definitely know where they are. So we lived here. I was here for 6 years, my brother for 4. And then we grew up in the show world. Those were 2 of our favorite show cows from back in the day. That picture was the year I graduated from the U and Kyle graduated from high school. Bottom left-hand corner is a recent picture from the farm. We celebrated my parents' 50th wedding anniversary on the farm. It's me and my brother and then my partner John in the middle. We had about 300 people come out to the farm to celebrate their anniversary. We decided we wanted to do it at the farm because we had just done a lot of improvements and we knew that everybody's going to want a tour of it anyway. Grew up in the 4-H program in Junior Holstein, and we very much were supporters and advocates for it. And the bottom right-hand picture is all the kids that showed cows from my farm in 1 year. We lease out a lot of animals to 4-Hers. The county fair is actually going on at home right now. We have some leased kids there. The kids are a lot older now. There's some that are still showing, some that aren't. The upper left-hand kid, he actually worked for me this summer. Another one's working in the dairy industry. He probably wouldn't be if he didn't have those type of opportunities. So we really believe in doing that long term. Just some pictures from the farm. As you can see, it's John and me in the center. We just built a double 10 parallel parlor, so the cows come to us and we milk them between their back legs. We milk right at about 100 cows. Milking takes about an hour and a half, and then we can go on to the rest of the stuff. Some people ask why we didn't go to robotics. We like to shut off the milkers and we like to go do other stuff instead of being called in to fix stuff or whatever. So there is a definite change in that mentality and management style. We also have a lot of employees. We have 4 high school kids that are currently working for us. 2 left in June to go do other summer jobs, and I had 4 kids drive in the next week asking for jobs that just really try to support them and really promote it. The left-hand picture with the egg crates on top of the semen tank is got a story. We do a lot of genetics, IVF flushing, removing the embryos from our high-end cows and putting in other cows. And the egg crates symbolize all the embryos we were getting back one day when we got 75 embryos back from one of our flushes. So then we put those embryos in other animals that aren't quite as superior genetically to really try to promote for the type of cow that we want. So that was a really big day. The right-hand picture is chisel plowing, which keeps some trash on top to reduce erosion. It's one of the things that we do on the farm. We don't do any moldboard plowing and really try to control the soil erosion and make sure we're doing soil health. It also incorporates that trash right in to help with the soil fertility. Pictures of some critters. On the left is our baby calf barn. We have a robotic calf feeder. They all have RFID in their ears, and they go up and the computer tells them whether or not they can drink or whether they can't. It limits them to how much they can drink at a time and how much they can drink through the day. I can go in and look at the computer then and see which calves maybe started and stopped, or watch their health a lot closer that way, on top of just overall management by looking at them. It's not a better way, it's not a worse way than some people do, but it's a different way of managing them. I can go in there about once a day and check through them instead of having to go in there twice a day or every so often to make sure. The picture on the right is our compost bedded pack barn. We were into it about 5 years. We use recycled sawdust from a local cabinet shop that's 3 miles away from us. They have it delivered. I'll have a load again tomorrow probably for the next group. And then we stir that in to make it compost, and then we clean that out once a year. So that is actually our manure storage and animal housing all in the same picture. We do have some manure storage for where they eat, but that's more liquidy and slop, so we get that out and away from them. But where they are right now in that picture, we just clean that out once a year and move it and incorporate it into the fields. So we didn't have to build a manure storage on top of it. It's also very flexible. It's great for cow comfort. You see how many cows are lying down. They're very comfortable there. And with where I'm located, we probably know that there won't be another dairy farmer on my place. This building can easily transfer into a beef setup down the road, or gives us flexibility for other things as the industry evolves, as well as our area. One last thing, I didn't get the picture because I didn't really want to climb a silo in the rain the other day. Where I'm located, we're definitely dealing with urban sprawl. Across the road from me, we now have 25 houses within a half a mile. And that has really changed how we think things through and manage stuff. Some stuff bad happens on farms and the animal will suddenly die, but we also very consciously, how are we going to make people not see it, or how we handle that. Manure hauling, try to work through that when we're going to be really busy hauling crop in, trying to work around that. And with where we're located, we have a lot of lake traffic. So there's a lot of traffic to St. Cloud as well as up to Mille Lacs Lake and north. So we try to not cut on certain fields where we'd be on Friday or Sunday or things like that. So it's one thing that when growing up, we never had to worry about or think about, but now we definitely think about it almost on a daily basis. So any quick questions about mine? Otherwise, I will pass it off to Megan.
Oh, real quick.
Yep.
Where you grow? You showed the picture of the chisel farm where you grow there?
Oh, yep. We grow. She asked, what do we grow for crops? We grow corn and alfalfa mainly, and that pretty much is all stuff that we use on the farm. We purchase very little feed, just mainly our protein and mineral mixes. Starting to look at we have started cover cropping in the last 3 years. And it works out really well because I can take that crop off and use for heifers, and depending if I can get it off in quality enough for cows. Otherwise, we will incorporate it right back in if we miss the window or whatever we need to at that point. Of course, weather is a big thing on whether that works or whether it doesn't and stuff, and what type of spring we have. Yeah.
I'm a dairy farmer as well, but this is not a planted question. It's a question I get that I think it can be helpful. So you've got some new innovative practices, the robotic calf feeding,
Yep.
and the compost bedded pack barns. And I think one question I get sometimes is, oh, you're showing us this stuff, but nobody else does it in the whole world. You know, you're special, and that's why we brought you in. You are special, Eric. But how many other compost bedded pack barns do you think there are in Minnesota or the upper Midwest? And same with robotic calf feeding, and then maybe why do people do those or not do those?
The composting kind of comes and goes in waves depending on availability of bedding and what they can come up with for different beddings. When we were looking at building this, there were many of them. There were some major pockets of them around cabinet shops and stuff. I used to work in extension for 10 years, so we would do a lot of farm tours to those. I always loved it. Our cows are big show cows, a lot of them. We also have some commercial cows, but it gives us good flexibility on that aspect. It's not a major percentage that I think are composting bedded pack barns, but I mean, it's some sort of a portion there. I would guess maybe 5 to 10. The robotic calf feeder, we're seeing more and more of them, and as well as many more different types of calf feeding systems. I know Megan has one and some others that are kind of like robotic but a little different. And it's just trying to come up with a different way to manage calves that is user-friendly as well as good for the animals. I love it because I can look at my phone or look at the computer and get a real good snapshot of what those calves are doing. We've been in that barn now for 10 years and done very little to it, and very little maintenance even on the feeder. And once we get the calves going, they go pretty good. So we're happy with that way. So, okay. Any other quick questions? Otherwise, I'll pass it off to Megan.
So AI for climate, are there additional data insights that you wish you had access to or could more easily get?
Can't think of anything off the top of my head, I guess. Let me ponder it. How about that?
Spoiler alert, I'm probably gonna ask both of you.
Yep, now you guys have the preparation, so be prepared. Okay? Okay, Megan.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, hi there. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Megan Schrupp. I'm a third generation dairy farmer located in central Minnesota in a small town of Eden Valley. I'm also a dairy veterinarian. I spent a few years in private practice practicing majority 95% with dairies in the state of Minnesota before I came back to work on my family's farm, which then my husband and I and our family, that's my sister and her family, my husband and I, we are now taking over the farm, and it's now called Next Gen Dairy. So this is just a quick snapshot of the dairy on the right. We milk 1,200 Jersey and Jersey cross cows to produce cheddar cheese here in Minnesota. We have all of the cows and now the heifers on site, so they're all on that location you see there. We do try to do everything in our dairy in-house, and we use a fair amount of technology. So we will raise most of our forages. We will raise corn and hay. We also do some triticale, some rye, and some oats as well. We do also buy a lot of byproducts for feeding our cows in our TMR ration. So we buy a lot of sweet corn silage left over from corn from the canning plant. We fed brewers grains, distillers grains, cottonseed, beet shreds from sugar beets. So we try to upcycle a lot of those byproducts from other industries within our dairy. As you can see too on the picture, let's see if I have a laser. Right here is a solar panel system. We power the dairy with solar energy. We actually have 2 solar fields. We have a larger one here. That one would powers most of the dairy. We've expanded the dairy after we put it in, so it doesn't quite cover. In the winter or when our fans aren't running and everything's at full bore for cooling, it'll provide most of our energy. And then we have a smaller 40 kW system way over by the calf barn and heifers. And that system was put in to initially sell the power all back onto the grid. Since we put that in, we brought our heifers back home, so we're using more of that power now. So the majority of power is being used on the dairy. We have 2 freestall barns that are 6 rows each. Cows are housed on mattresses with sawdust bedding. They're milked 3 times a day in a double 16 parallel parlor. We also have a second parlor that's a single 10. That's just for fresh cows, spoiled cows, show Guernseys. We do have Guernseys. I married into Guernseys, so we show Guernseys at World Dairy Expo. We also house Brown Swiss, and we were initially years ago part of the University of Minnesota's crossbreeding trial, which included Swedish Red, Montbéliard, and Holstein crosses. But we are now converting the entire herd to Jersey genetics. As you can see, the cow here on the left, that cow has definitely some crossbred genetics back in her story, but you can see the Jersey coming through. We use a fair amount of technology, like I said, on the farm. So all of our cows here have individual cow monitoring system. We have the new NEDAP collars through Alta Cow Watch, which allow us to collect data on the cows, such as inactivity, so line time, rumination, and eating time, and also heat stress. So breathing rates are recorded, and we can collect that data on individual cows as well as data by group hens and overall for the whole dairy. That data will also give us cycling rates for the dairy, heat stress rates, as in last week when it was really hot. So we can kind of use some of that data to make different management decisions within the dairy. All of that data is reported on my phone, as you can see in the other picture. So I do a lot of time in the morning on my phone, see what's going on in the dairy to kind of, our goal is to dairy where we let cows just be cows, and we use technology to just kind of monitor the cows instead of us having to go in and disturb the cows. So a lot of our management decisions will be based upon, you know, the individual cow data that the AI is reporting to me, rather than me going and having to physically bother the cow, get her up, go look at her, things like that. And it allows us to make objective decisions rather than subjective decisions and have much quicker turnaround time, such as feed changes that would maybe need to be made. We can see, instead of waiting to see what our bulk tank milk volumes would be or fat and protein components changing in our bulk tank, we can instantly see how the cows are actually eating or ruminating, and we can make those changes next day for the next batch, much quicker turnaround time. Other technology we are looking at in the future going forward would be, we'll be putting in a methane digester to produce natural gas that will be sold back onto the market to fuel residential homes. And then our parlor is 24 years old, so we're going to be updating our parlor, and we're looking next year to put in technology that would allow us to give us real-time analysis of components in milk, somatic cell count, pregnancy hormones, BHBAs, things like that into our milk. So that would allow us to kind of further analyze our forages and our feeding system and further fine-tune that within our dairy. I think that's all the pictures I have. As far as in regards to technology and your question that you asked about what technology would we look to have, we do all of our own manure application. So we do all of our own all of our own harvesting, planting, field work, but we also do all of our own manure application with, we do a drag line and we inject manure into our fields. And what we are interested in pursuing here in the future is to do like a rate flow limiter, and then there's John Deere has like an infrared technology where you can analyze your nutrient analysis of your manure, and with that we hope to be able to further fine tune exactly what we're putting on the field and nutrient analysis on that end. My husband is more in charge of all that. I'm in charge of everything under the barn roof, being the veterinarian, and I manage all the employees and things of that nature. So our calves are raised in group hens, as Eric kind of led to, but we do individual feeding. So they are paired shortly after birth with the buddy in calf huts, and then at about 3 weeks age, they go into a group pen where they're individually fed with bottles, and then they kind of flow through. It's in a straw packs barn, and they kind of flow through the system onto the bedding pack in larger groups as they get older, and then to return to the herd. So, and as far as genetics, we're using all, I think we had some questions on genetics, we're using all sex Jersey semen for female replacements. Everything else is being bred beef semen. So Angus, Sim Angus cross, and those animals are going to a neighbor's farm where he is raising all of those, and then to finish, and then they're going into JBS, I think JBS in Green Bay. So, does anybody have any questions? There's a lot I kind of threw at you.
what metrics do you use to measure like heat stress with the cows?
So the heat stress is on the NEDAP system is in the beta version. So they're having they have their own statistical model to report it in their software. But I don't know if the other cow, no. So prior to having the NEDAP system collars, we had that years ago. We had an old system that did just, heat detection and milk weights in our parlor. We upgraded that to SCR with the ear tag in 2018. And on that, they actually did like breathing time, like heavy breathing. They had their own model and their own, what I want to say, like they had their own number or what they called it for breathing time. And it gives you like an increase above your baseline is what it does. It's not really giving you like the animal's respiratory rate. It's just telling you the difference from normal. But we've phased out of the ear tags and are now back into the NEDAP system.
And those are the collars.
The collars, the blue collars. Yeah, they're green if you buy them from Gia, and I think they're red if you buy them from Lele. So if we got blue, they're from Volta. So.
Yeah, I was just gonna make a comment. My dad's from Eden Valley, and so we have sort of the resort on the one side of Eden Valley Lake there. So I don't know, Hagues, if you're connected, any Hagues in that area.
Yeah.
I was just gonna mention my dad's the youngest of 10, so a lot of Hagues.
There are a lot of Hagues in the area. Yeah. That's awesome. Any other questions? Okay. If not, Margaret, you're up. Yeah, just forward and back. Is this the?
Oh, yeah, okay. Click that. Okay. I don't know if I need the microphone or not. I didn't think Megan really used it. I thought we could hear her okay. Is that all right?
Yes, please.
Yeah, they need it.
Use it
for-
back. Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay.
Forgot about that.
Thank you. Glad I asked. So, before mentioned, I am Margaret Johnson. I am a dairy farmer with my husband and his father-in-law. Our farm name is Trailside Holsteins because the Root River Bike Trail that goes from Fountain, Minnesota to Houston, it's about 45 miles or something like that, goes directly through our farm. So, it divides our cropland from our dairy site. So, a lot of people have been down to the Lanesboro area to ride on the bike trail, and they've gone right past our farm. So, in this picture is my family. I have 5 children, ages 12 to almost 3. And my father-in-law, John, who started the farm in 1978. His father-in-law helped him get started. He brought a handful of cows to the dairy.
Your dad then?
No, my father-in-law.
Oh, I thought you said his father-in-law. I was like, yeah.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Maybe I did. Real complicated. I know it's just southern Minnesota, but still down south. No, my husband's father-in-law. Yeah.
It's like, oh, your brother.
My husband's father. Yes, thanks, Eric. I'm saying it again. I probably did say it. My father-in-law. Thank you for the clarification. So anyways, he came and he had about 6 cows at that time, and his father so my dad's we're all mixed up now. My father-in-law's father-in-law helped him get started, and they worked on shares and with a lot of different other dairy farmers in the area. They all came there about the same time and kind of helped each other get going and would help each other with different farm practices when they didn't have as much hired help or the ability to have hired help. So that's kind of how the farm got started, and the trail used to be a railroad, and so it was always there. And in the early 80s, a train would go through every once in a while. It's a fun piece of history before they turned it into the bike trail. But I met my husband in college. I did not go to the University of Minnesota. I went to River Falls, and I grew up on a dairy farm. We milked 27 cows. And when I went to college, I had a job on a farm where we milked 700 cows. So I'd seen quite a perspective, quite a range in different farms. And I met my husband, and then I got a job selling seed, which is where I kind of got a little bit of an agronomy background. I got that job to kind of support my farming habit because I wasn't able to. My brother had just come back from college and was milking 50 cows, so I wasn't able to jump right into dairy farming after college. So I got an agronomy background there where I earned my certified crop advisor certification. I have a master's in agronomy, and I worked in the precision ag realm of things and would install ag leader equipment onto combines and planters and things like that to gather data. So in reference to your question, we want data on everything. So all the data for all the things is what we enjoy looking at. So this is an aerial view of the dairy. Kind of in the forefront of the picture is the feed center. We've transitioned from using all bags to now having several bunkers, which we can just store more feed easily. It's a little bit easier to manage. There's less variability in the feed that is brought into the dairy. The bags are the white long lines on the side, and essentially it's like packing it into a big Ziploc bag. So we have a machine that you can dump a semi-load of silage in about 2 minutes into the bagger, and it bags it into there. And the bagger takes the air out of the silage so that it can ferment properly and make a good feed. And so the tractor that is on the pile is doing essentially the same thing, is packing the feed and taking the air out of the silage so it ferments correctly. We have 2 freestall barns. They are 4-row barns, so that means that there are the freestalls that are in there. There's a row of 2 on each side, so 2 sets of beds. Behind the barn, the manure is scraped out of the barn every time they're brought down to milk, and the manure is stored in the back of the barns. You can just kind of see it along the left side of the picture, which is not really visible. There we go. Like right along here, we have a big lagoon, and we have our manure is separated, so it goes through a series of screens, so the water is seeped into this other lagoon, which then gives us the potential, which we could irrigate it if we wanted to. Which then we haul with slingers, and that can be it's just a different management style. We have actually been pumping our lagoon water into our main pit so we can use the dragline system that Megan talked about, just because it's less fuel, less trucks up and down the road. It's less invasive, for lack of a better term. It's just the tractor in the field and then the pumps that get the manure to where you're going. So we've really enjoyed that feature. In the picture on the left, your right, I think, whatever, the picture of the cow is a cow in our herd, and I want to point out the orange ear tag that is in her ear, which is similar to Megan's collar system. This is the cow manager system, and it does similar things to what Megan had said. It has an accelerometer in that tag, and so that uses the accelerometer to tell, like, this means she's eating, and this means that she's ruminating. And so they have it all down, figured out by collecting lots and lots of points of data. They have it figured out of what she's doing when using that ear tag. So it will tell things like temperature, and that's kind of Megan referred to that as well as with the heat stress. It's not her actual body temperature. It will tell you if it deviates from the rest of the herd. So you can use that, but primarily we use like the rumination, so how much she is ruminating, and her activity level. So these tags have really allowed us to, we have less employees. We were kind of at the point when we needed to decide if we were going to hire a herdsperson to specifically take care and monitor cows at all times, or we chose to invest in this system, which has essentially eliminated 1 employee from our farm, because we can confidently look at our system, look at the phone, look at the computer, whatever we're using, and monitor the cow and make a decision based on the information that's there. So if she is eligible to be bred, to get pregnant, we can make all those decisions based on that system. We also use it's called Pocket Cow Card, and it is hooked to the Dairy Comp system. So all of our cows have kind of like a client service system, like maybe what you would use. So it's kind of like a profile of every cow that we have in our herd. So we can connect those 2 systems to know all their historic details within the herd, all their prior family members, things like that, and connect them to the cow manager system, which will tell us what we should make in like real-time decisions for that cow. And when my husband first got it, I was kind of like all of our cows had gotten social media, because it had the app on his phone would moo every time that a cow would send an alert. And so we quickly learned to shut that off, because when you have 650 cows you're getting a lot of moos. And so like if a cow was like, if she was being extra active or something, it would moo. So we had to learn to shut that off, but it's their way of communicating with us, even though they don't necessarily know it. So it's kind of taken that language barrier out with the cows, which we've really enjoyed because we really feel confident that we're monitoring every cow that's in our barn without, like Megan said, to disrupting the animal, and they can just do their thing, and we are monitoring them at all times. So it's been a really beneficial system to us. So the next picture, there's cows on pasture there. We live in southeast Minnesota. We live about 30 minutes south of Rochester, and it has a very unique topography. We have a karst topography, which means there's lots of sinkholes in the area, and sinkholes are a natural land feature that we have to specifically farm around because they can be a direct route to groundwater. And so in our area, because of the nature of the hilly environment and the sinkholes and things like that, we have areas that are not suitable to be row crops. So then we have those areas pastured, and all summer long our heifers are on pasture, as many as we can get. So this is a picture of that. Somebody goes and checks on all the pastures every day and gives them a little bit of grain just to supplement what they're eating, counts them all, make sure they're all there. Because since they're away from internet, they don't have social media. So they go camping for the summer and it's like as though they were in the Boundary Waters. The picture in the middle is a picture of our land. We are, I would say, gently rolling. I grew up next to the Winona Hills. So real true bluff country. So to me, it's very gently rolling where we are now. But we still do utilize contour strips to ensure that our soil maintains its integrity within the field. The picture in the center is a picture of a waterway that has done its job. So we are very careful about protecting the waterways and utilizing waterways within our field since we are hilly. So essentially what this picture is showing is that the grass that we have planted in the waterway is specifically tall, durable grass that will essentially lay down when the water comes through and then act like a slide. So the water slides over the top and isn't disturbing the soil that is underneath it. So I just really love that picture because it did its job. And then there are intermittent waterways that will fill with water on such a rainfall and will eventually go to the Root River. So that is a picture that I like to share. And then the other picture is a picture of a rye cover crop. We plant primarily corn and alfalfa and then winter rye. So after we chop our corn, we plant winter rye as soon as we can because when you chop corn, it leaves the ground quite bare. And by planting the rye, it gets a cover on it as quickly as possible that will stay there all winter long and into the spring, which then we harvest it like Eric had mentioned. We harvest ours primarily for heifer feed. And this year we tried something different where we planted the cover crop and then we applied our manure right on top of the growing crop, which was an interesting way to do it. It worked well. The crop still looked good. We didn't harvest everything. Some of it we just plowed it under as though it were green manure essentially. So that's a little bit about us. I'm sure there are so many things. Like when you get up here, you're thinking like, oh gosh, there's a lot of things to talk about, but we only have so much time. So I'll take any questions. I'm pretty sure that was all. Yeah.
Margaret?
Yes.
At the very end, you said you seeded your winter rye, and then you applied the manure right on top of that after it was growing?
Yep. After it
Surface
was
applied or
Nope, it was injected.
injected? Okay. A minimum disturbance type of?
We drag lined it.
Oh, okay.
So with a toolbar behind the tractor, and then it was injected behind that.
Thanks.
So when you have a drag line system, and I know one of our other panelists mentioned, okay, you also have one. So how does that impact your manure management? Do you apply more to the fields that are closer to your farm because of the limitations, or try to spread it out more evenly?
That's a great question. So for our farm specifically, they can actually pump it a lot farther than you would think. So we pump almost 2 miles from our dairy. So just the nature of farming, most of our land is around our dairy because that's where we live, that's where we've acquired that land. And so they do have to use like booster pumps. So it's like as big as a van, I would say. And then they put fuel in it, and then that will like boost that manure to keep going. And so we recently pumped on a neighbor's land, which again was pretty close. It was probably more like a mile and a half, but it had to go uphill. So they used 2 booster pumps in their system to get it to that field. So I know that when they were doing that, they were saying they were pumping 3,000 gallons a minute. And so in order to do that with like semi-trailers and manure tankers and things like that, it's good for the roads. It's just, I really like it. I don't know, you want to like to comment on that?
Yeah, we can get the manure basically to all of our fields. We've pumped, I think the longest we've pumped is up to 6 miles with several boosters. So what it does is it just reduces the amount of time, fuel, and the bigger issue too is safety on the roadway. Is like pulling a big tanker of liquid manure is really dangerous when people are texting and driving. So it's such a hazard. And the manure system hose will come in different sizes. So some of the original stuff probably was more like a 6-inch hose. I think now they have up to 10-inch hose. You can pump a lot of liquid manure pretty far away with that equipment. So it doesn't really limit kind of where we go, or like we wouldn't not put it on a field because we're using this application method. The other thing too is like we've had more neighbors that are conventional farmers that just do corn and soybeans and traditionally have just bought in commercial fertilizer, now have purchased dairy liquid manure, which comes with a whole bunch of other, awesome things in it. And we've been able to put that on some just cash cropping land that's been in the area as well, because it's just so much easier to apply.
It's also less compaction.
Yeah.
You have less tankers, less equipment going through the field, so it's better for soil quality, which you can see this time of year when the corn is growing, it's affected by that. You mentioned data and what do you like to collect? So we collect data off our cow manager system. The reason I bring it up in reference to the manure, so they are actively monitoring everything. So if they lose any pressure in their hose, they can go and check it right away. They're also collecting, making maps of like where that manure is being hauled. So we automatically have record of where that manure has been. We take soil samples on our farm to check quality and nutrient levels. We use the Pocket Cow Card for all of our cows. We take genomic samples on all of our calves that are born, so we can advance our genetics faster by knowing what that animal, what her genetic potential is, basically within days of her being born. Our bulk tank is all connected to the internet, so we can actively get messages if like the temperature drops or something like that. So we monitor as much as we can, and we collect as many points of data as we can. We're actually going to put the cow manager tags in our calves. Like next week, the owner of the company from Amsterdam is coming and going to introduce that to our dairy and show us kind of how to do it and how to read data from it. So we're really looking forward to that because it's worked so well with the cows, and actually we have it in our breeding age heifers, and so now we're looking at implementing it basically on our entire herd, so we'll know across 1,200 animals how every single one is feeling on a daily basis, as long as they're close to internet.
Building on that, like of those different data sets that you essentially are collecting and managing, which of those is the biggest pain in the butt for you guys to do that you wish you could be easier? And then I guess like what would be the next thing that you wish you could, I guess, track or had better metrics or insights on, either cow related or field related?
So I guess for me personally, so we're gonna put cow manager tags in our calves, so that'll be kind of the first step to kind of complete from birth to being in our herd. So that is getting kind of covered. So for me specifically, I think there's a lot of challenge in precision agriculture when it comes to the crop side of things, because I know that when I was actively working in that industry a little more intensely, I wanted data on everything. And even though you could get data every like 1 or 2 seconds, the equipment that you're using is still so large. So even though you feel like you're making a very specific recommendation, it's still on a certain scale. So I love that with the cows, you can treat them individually. And I know there's a lot of technology that's coming out where, you know, they're using laser technology and things like that to identify weeds. So they are spraying for specific weeds throughout a field. A lot of those things that are coming are just too expensive right now, but are still like, they're coming. And so we look forward to some of those. I know at World Dairy Expo last year, they were talking about having, I don't know how it works, but basically they identify cows through cameras, and then that is identifying them instead of finding them, sorting them, doing all the things instead of you having to manually go out and look for them. So that's technology that is in the pipeline already, but.
Yeah, I would add to that, price is a huge.
Yeah.
Prices and the cost of investment and the return on your investment can be a large limitation of the technology might be really cool and useful, but if we can't show a return to that investment, that's a really burden to entry, especially like, so for example, our callers have the ability for us to do positioning to find a cow, and I think NEDAP's working on some VR goggles on that end. But the cost to put in the other hardware that would allow you to do that might be a barrier to entry with that system, as an example. But the other thing I'd like to add too is a dairyman. We start getting all of this data. There's so many hours in my day to look at that data and go through it and make management decisions upon that. So integration of systems is huge. So we will maybe choose a system over another if we can get that data to all report within one app or within one system. So Dairy Comp right now we use, because we're getting our NEDAP data is dumping into Dairy Comp, right? Our Feed Watch data from our TMR and our rations is dumping into Dairy Comp. Dairy Comp is using milk weights. We can do feed efficiencies and stuff because all of those systems are integrating. So I think if your system doesn't integrate, it gets really difficult to start opening up 5 or 6 different apps every day to get all of your data.
You referenced the different colors,
Yeah.
right? I mean, same thing with tractors. Are those companies all standardizing their data formats?
That's a good question. I was actually going to make that comment. So back when I was working in that world, John Deere was always kind of the outlier. They always, because they want to be the premium, they want everybody to go to John Deere, and so they wouldn't work as friendly with a lot of other things. I worked with Ag Leader Equipment, which is based out of Ames, Iowa, and their kind of goal was to make everything work together since it was essentially an aftermarket product. And so I still use their software, which will read almost everything, and it will read John Deere, but there are certain things that are tricky. And so it is hard, but yes, having them integrated makes it so much easier if you don't have to be locked in. And then with John Deere too, it's a price point of, are you willing to spend the money for the green paint? But a lot of times with the green paint comes good service too. So it's tricky, but then you are kind of locked in there, which is their goal, but it can make other like newer technologies that might be aftermarket a little more challenging to integrate into your current system.
And the three of us all come from very different size farms. I milk 100 cows, and there's a lot of things that the price points and the thresholds work very well for them. I can't justify it for my size of dairy, and that's the dairy industry in general. You have all these different sizes, and so a blanket doesn't work anywhere because what works on theirs, like we don't use a dragline system. I can't justify a dragline system for 100 cows. We surface apply our manure, we work it in immediately and stuff, but it's just that wouldn't work on our situation. We also have the bedded pack, that doesn't work with that. There's just a lot of different factors in the dairy industry. We do have Cow Manager now. We got that, and I do love that, especially in my milk cows. So I have that on the app. I do have the apps for Dairy Comp and stuff that they've come out with a new limited version type of thing for my size, and that's worked out really well. Don't do the Feed Watch system. It just doesn't make sense for my system. So that's one of the things, like anytime you're working on something new in the dairy industry, we got to remember the dairy industry is from one extreme to the other in any way, shape, and form. So.
I will also comment on that. So if Eric is, we're all different sizes, right? So, but even if everybody in this room, if we all three had 650 cows, we would all still be extremely diverse. So that's just because we're different sizes doesn't mean that that's the only diversity that we have. So there's, and it's deeper than just the land we're on, the amount of cows that we milk. It goes really deep, the diverse choices that we make and how we implement things on our farm.
Especially like with the lifestyle choices, what's important for us growing up or how we handle our cows and what we want our legacy in our community to be might not be the same somewhere else. But I think that the overall reaching goal is always going to be taking care of the animals, taking care of the environment, and just taking care of the people all involved in that, and no particular order, that they're all important to us. So
You set me up perfectly for my question. So thinking about all three of you and the skills that you require to do your job, to like analyze the data, make decisions based off that data. You mentioned hiring a lot of high school students on your farms. Do you see like 10, 20 years from now, like what kinds of skill sets do you anticipate like kids that you're hiring from schools to do some sorts of skills on the farm, and then as well as like the skill sets that like you will need to acquire as like this technology develops?
That's a good question. I think I'll maybe take a stab at that. It's an interesting question to me, especially having a DVM background, having an 8-year college degree. I sometimes get that question a lot, like, where I'm at now, like, would I do that again or things like that? But really what we look for are just people with the right attitude. We're just like looking for people that are willing to be creative, willing to work together, teamwork, all of that. The stuff we're talking about, the skills, like anybody can learn that sort of thing, whether we can learn it on the job or learn it on the job and provide them additional training or an opportunity to a 2-year program or a 4-year program. Some of the more advanced stuff, depending on how deep you want to dive. So maybe some further education. But I think the biggest limitation to labor in general is people with a good attitude, ready to come to work, willing to show up on a regular basis, be on time, and work as a team is probably more important.
Yeah, well said.
Definitely agree. I do not pay as much as McDonald's does. I'll be the first to admit that. I just financially can't. But we definitely take a team mentality. Like, I will almost never tell you that you can't have a day off if you got something going on. But if I'm going to be gone, I need you to step in too. Because like things like this today, I do enjoy doing. I enjoy judging county fairs. There's times I need to get my mental health going by getting away for a little bit. So having other people that can come in and do that. But we very much try to teach them the importance of not only the animal care, but working together. And then also the responsibility. And I also make it a big point. I do have a lot of high school kids that the second time you come, you have to bring your parents with too. Because I want to talk to the parents, give me a face-to-face with them so then I can get their phone number in case of emergencies, but also then they know that I'm looking out for their child too. And I've had some kids now that they've been with me for 6 years. One of them is doing electrician work, but he still comes and milks every weekend because he just loves the cows and likes to come around. So just developing those connections. I also I come from a youth development background, so I also take it another step by showing them opportunities. If I'm going to a meeting on nutrition and I know it's a kid who could go into that world, I take them with. For instance, Dylan, who he sells Dairy Comp now essentially. I know he works with Megan quite a bit. Hey, I'm going to go to a nutrition conference this weekend just for a day. Do you want to ride with? Yep. And it opens their eyes to a whole lot of different things, introduce them to a lot of different people. He didn't go to the U. He went to Iowa to a private college, but we got him back into it. And so just show that there are those technologies. And kids love technology, so we can really show them those opportunities that way. So
I think Megan said it really well. We work hard to develop a work culture. So it's a place that if we can't always pay as much as the neighbor or a local job in town, that we have a work culture that they want to be a part of and that they take ownership and understand the reason behind what they're doing so they can kind of buy into like I'm part of that, and that has worked well with us for retaining employees
And also
and
showing that,
attracting them.
yeah, and show that they're appreciated. Like, it might not be anything, but like, hey, like, I really appreciate what you did this weekend. Let's go grab dinner quick type of thing. So make them kind of part of it, not just come punch in, come and leave. So
I've got more questions, sorry.
it's okay.
Go ahead, ask away. Now's your chance.
So shifting kind of to like the buzzy climate conversation right now,
Mhm.
are any of you guys making deliberate decisions based off of carbon outcomes right now?
Not specifically for me, for my size. We only farm right at about 300 acres and 100 cows. More so soil health, and looking at that type of stuff long term, using the cover crops, incorporating manure, different types of manure. We are breaking some ground of a field that just it wasn't good one way or the other, so we're trying to move that in. But really watching the erosion. We also have a lot of rivers in the area, that type of thing. But with my size, it's not on my radar as much. A methane digester at my size is really hard to justify at that point. So.
Yeah, I'd say the short answer is no, not specifically. I mean, we're doing all of the practices that we feel are right for the soil based on the science that is out there. We're experimenting with new things like planting the cover crop and then applying the manure once it's growing, things like that. So we can really do right by the soil. And because that soil, hopefully our kids will farm that ground, or if it's not our kids, somebody else will farm that ground someday to produce food. So I guess we're not looking, and I don't know if your question was specifically toward this, but we're not looking to like make money on carbon or anything like that. But we have had a carbon audit on our farm, and still at this point, they gave us a number. This is your number, but they couldn't really like expand of like how that compares or even what that means. So I think it's still really early to implement some of that information.
Who did that for you? Like, who gave you that number?
I think our co-op did it. We also were part of a board. There's a farm just into Iowa that, well, it's, what is it? It's the Kelmer, they have a dairy program. It's Northeast Iowa.
Northeast Iowa.
Yeah. Yep. So they would like to be the first carbon neutral farm in Iowa. And so my husband has participated with meetings in there, and they were giving suggestions and information about that. But I think the one that we had done specifically was through where we sell milk.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on that. There's the farm program, as Bob is alluding to. It's a Farmers Assuring Responsible Management. It's a certification that a lot of the co-ops in the United States have all of their members that are supplying milk into the milk supply go through that program. They've added an environmental assessment to that. And if you're curious about what that all entails, you can just go online and look at the farm program. We did that prior to installation of our solar when it was like a beta version. We've redone that program now, and you have to get certified every so many years. So we've done that post. But yeah, we've had the conversation. Obviously, we're going to go forward and put in a digester here going with that. But I think one of the advantages that dairy has with as far as crops and soil is, we can fit all these different crops such as alfalfa straight into as a rotation, as part of a normal, really common practice that we use within our industry, rather than cash cropping, just doing corn and soybeans, right? So, and we have all this access to natural, great fertilizer, liquid manure. We're not separating our manure right now, so it comes with all the organic matter that's going right back into that soil, all the water that's produced on our farm, as far as for cooling or cleaning or whatever, all of that goes into our lagoon. It's all injected back into the soil to go right back into like our local environment. So I think that's one of the cool things about dairy naturally. Maybe we're starting to look at carbon, but we've done a lot of this stuff forever, for years. We pastured cows. We've had cows trample grass and poop out in the pasture for, my grandfather, to do some of that for soil health. So that's one of the cool parts about dairy.
If I could add to Leif's question, if you are doing anything, if there were some incentives for you, I mean, what would make you make some changes, some practice changes, I mean, what's that tipping point where you would be looking at carbon sequestration or reducing your methane emissions that would have you make you have that more of a consideration in your management?
I think an easy one, Bob, is going to be to tell them to put alfalfa in the farm bill for subsidies. That's really easy, right? To convince the government to do that. I mean, think of the subsidies that corn and soybean farmers get for alfalfa. If we could, or I mean, for their crops, if we could put alfalfa into that program and get all the people that don't have cattle to start putting alfalfa as another, crop in their rotation, would be fantastic. And that comes down to financial incentives, right? So, and that's a lot of it. Dairy farming, we have to really look at the bottom line, especially recently as all of our input costs have gone up, labor's gone up, everything's gone up. So it really does come down to incentives and what's the barrier to entry financially.
I think we're all willing to do the right thing if we can. I agree with the financial incentives, but I also feel like if a farmer feels like it's going to preserve the resources that they're using, they're going to be willing to do it despite there being an added cost. And I feel like there has been a failure to communicate some of those incentives that are outside of the financial, and maybe a lack of understanding that it has to be financially affordable or in a financial grasp that a dairy farmer can even implement it.
I would agree. I think that there's such a sense of pride between dairy farmers of what they have on their land, how they're taking care of everything, to make sure that it plays into that. But it does come down to finances, especially since COVID. I mean, we've all seen the increase in our input costs that doubled in times, but yet our milk price went down. So the last couple of years especially have been a little tough for the dairy industry, to be perfectly honest, but we still have pride in how we're taking care of the stuff there, and whether it be the soil, the crops, the cows, the people. So,
but I guess I'll just add to that. You haven't changed how you're caring for your animals.
No.
Like, even though the dairy, the price hasn't been great, Eric hasn't changed. He's not giving them less feed. He's not, he's not using less bedding, all those things. So the dairy farmer is still doing right by the cow and doing right by the land, because that's what they believe in. And Eric gets paid last. Everything else is taken care of first. And he personally is willing to take that pay cut to do what is right. And I shouldn't say just you, but all of us up here.
You don't get paid last? I might be at the wrong farm.
We're willing to be paid last to do what's right, to maintain those resources.
Correct.
Mike Schutz here from the University of Minnesota, Department of Animal Science. I was going to ask a question, but Bob kind of stole the question I was going to ask, so you did a good job of answering that. So I'm going to ask my other question, which is, from your standpoint as a dairy farm, and you've got very diverse operations, but what do you think is the single biggest challenge that you face right now?
For me, it's the urban sprawl. It really truly is. And the change in the community. There's a lot of people who have no interest in agriculture, but they think they want to live in a country. Having a conversation with my vet gets very interesting when she talks about the calls that she gets because somebody decided to have one cow, but the cow needs help, but we don't know what's wrong, type of thing. So we try to take it another step by doing quite a bit of education, whether it be tours. We have a pretty good social media presence on Facebook between me and John, and having fun with it, but yet trying to educate as we're going about it, because we still have to have fun and be able to smile at the end of the day. So for me, that's probably the biggest thing. One of my neighbors, I was chatting with him very nicely one day, and I said, "Oh, how's things going for building?" Because he builds houses. And he goes, "Well, I got my new development all picked out." I'm like, "Oh, where are you going to put that at?" And he pointed to my field right across the road. That didn't go over very well. That's not what I had for a goal at that time. It might happen eventually, but not now. and stuff. So it's that type of a situation. So that's where we try to get more involved in the community so they see us. We support a lot of the local stuff, whether it be a chair at a high school game or whatever, just to really try to keep our name out in front of them, and know that there's dairy farming going. And they seem very, very appreciative of it. And they always ask lots of questions. I serve on local school committee for our Hall of Fame, and like with the bird flu stuff going on, they instantly started asking me questions when we just had a committee meeting the other night. And so that's good resource to have too, so.
I think that we have always been always been open to change, and we're open to change that can, have the cows give us more milk or have the land produce more corn or whatever. But the change that's hard for us, that's going to be hard for us, is change that doesn't want to embrace us, and meaning like the freedom to operate. And whether that is the government regulations or social regulations that are put into place, I feel like that will be really challenging in the future. Regulations by the government aren't always inclusive. Well, I mean, a regulation for you, maybe you can follow it, but maybe our farm it doesn't really make sense for. So it's very challenging to have some of that, but even as far as labor or manure application or things like that. So we try to be, like Eric said, be good stewards of the land and of our relationships within our community, just so they can know that if they do have questions that they can ask us, and try to be real open and transparent with people. So we can push off that change that isn't willing to take us on.
I would agree with you. I think that's a great one. The one I would add would be milk markets and milk price. We look and we're getting paid for our milk what my grandfather got paid for milk, or close to it. And, he farmed 1970s, 60s. So if we want to have the next generation continue producing food for this country, producing U.S. grown food for U.S. citizens, what milk price are they going to get paid in the next 20 years? And then we talk about regulation. Then we look at the changes in the dairy industry and the increase in volatility in milk price and milk markets. And we're such a global food producing country, talking about sizes of dairies that are now being permitted, new milk plants, where milk is going in the United States. So it's a lot of change on that end as well that we really are trying to watch, and really trying to always ask ourselves, are we doing as best we can at repositioning ourselves? That's pretty challenging. And it seems like as soon as you feel like things are kind of calming down a little bit, it's like, oh, here's a curveball. So just keeping on top of all that.
Well, and dairy farmers are good at evolving too. As time has gone, we've learned that we do better when we select for components. So you're selling more fat and protein pounds instead of just straight milk. So you start selecting genetically for that type of a thing. But we got to remember too that, the dairy industry is a big industry, and the world population is growing, and milk is a great nutritious thing that gets it right out there to the people without a lot of backsides or anything like that. It's wholesome, it's easy to really feed the world with. And as they're predicting a 10 billion world population by 2050, how are we going to feed them? And I don't know if we can build enough labs to grow stuff for that type of thing, whereas this takes care of that.
Anybody else? Well, they covered a lot, but they didn't cover everything because we did have a few that came in online. So if this spurs a question, don't feel, leave down and we'll get you the microphone. I wanted to talk a little bit more about water or water quality. And so what measures is the dairy industry promoting that would protect water quality or lands receiving manure application as it relates to water quality? And I think I would also insert are you Minnesota Ag Water certified? If so, how was that process for you?
We aren't certified yet. We're working on it. We incorporate our manure as soon as we put it out on the field with different tillage practices. And then we reuse the water for the cooling. We cool the milk instantly with a plate cooler. Cows drink that. But then we also reuse our parlor wash water into the lagoon, and then that goes out to the field. So that's mine.
I guess, excuse me, I would echo a lot of what Eric said. We do similar things, and we're also working on the water certification. We have a very unique topography, like I mentioned, with it being the karst, so we have some extra barriers that, I shouldn't say barriers, but just when we're spreading manure, challenges that we need to be cognizant of when we're out in the field. There's the Driftless Area Ag Alliance that has just formed, and they are a water quality group. And so being a part of that and attending some of their meetings, and they're just really being forward thinking about water quality. And it's a group of farmers that are working on that in Southeast Minnesota. So they're doing really great work, and it's a farmer-led group that can get education out there to both farmers of how to learn to do better, and then just even in the community of this is what we're doing to do a good job.
I don't think I have anything really new to add. We're not certified. We're direct injecting. We have the grass waterways that you're talking about. We have certain fields. We don't put manure on certain areas. We recycle all of our water for cooling milk. Then it's for the cows to drink, or to cool the cows. The milk wastewater too, we use it to wash several times. So we wash the parlor and then wash the floor with it. So we try to just get a lot of uses out of a gallon of water.
For our audience, is anyone familiar with the Minnesota Ag Water Certification Program? Okay, I got a few head nods. Okay, so I will speak. Our dairy is certified, and we did go through that process 4 years ago. There's several dairies that are certified in Minnesota, and it is what seems like a complicated process, but it's not. It's not too bad. I work with our soil conservation group and go through all of our practices related to soil, agronomy, manure management, and then some of our practices on our dairy farm as well. And we get a score. If you score in the appropriate category, you get your certification. So if you're driving in rural Minnesota and you happen to see a sign, because those of us that are certified like to brag about it, I think, you know that they were certified by the state for that.
What's the benefit? There is, you can get some.
Yeah.
It's good. Looks good on grants.
It looks very good on grants.
Basically, you're moved up higher on the list for grants was the main benefit that was explained to me.
Yeah.
7 years of regulatory certainty, so 10 years. So if tomorrow, they say, you gotta do this law for swine manure, you're locked into yesterday's policy.
There's some small automatic $5,000 grants you get as
Yeah.
part of it as well to shore up something.
Good. I think Lucas and I both sit on the advisory board for that.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
So that is one benefit. I will speak to our farm personally. It was about what Margaret alluded to, and that is that we were doing what we thought was right for our land and our area. We're in east central Minnesota, so very different from these three farmers in front of you. Our average field size is 10 and a half acres. We've cropped somewhere around 25 or 2,500 acres of land at that size. It's rocks and swamps and a lot of grass. And so our mentality was, how do we work with the government to make sure we continue to be able to farm in this fragile environment? Because we know dairy cattle are just like this picture in the pasture. We have hundreds of acres that can't be row cropped, but I can put heifers out on that property and I can still raise food on that property. And if we're leasing land from people that are in Minneapolis that own land in our county, and they're able to see that we're going to put these cattle out, lease it from them, and we're going to be able to maintain that property so it doesn't become overgrown. It's not a waste of space. It's eye appealing, right? There's curb appeal. But it's also for us, it's a way to raise livestock. So very different. We cannot drag line where I live. It's not feasible.
Somebody with the same amount of rocks, I understand.
Yes, we say this a little tongue in cheek, but our crop map looks like metastasized cancer. Like it's all over the place. It's a 6-mile radius from our dairy, but it is all little itty bitty fields. If we get a 25-acre chunk, it's kind of a win. So, but it doesn't mean we can't grow crops. It doesn't mean we can't have dairy. It doesn't mean we don't try things. And part of that Minnesota Ag Water certification process was we learned other practices we could implement that would work well. We grew rye as a cover crop. We harvest our corn silage. We come back, we plant rye. This year we're far enough north where we get some Lake Superior climate. We had to prevent plant, which means we harvested the rye in the middle of June. We did not plant anything back on 350 acres. So we had to file for prevent plant back to that government policy to say, hey, we're not even going to try to disturb the soil. We're just going to let the rye grow back. We cut it off as it matured and turned it into bedding, but we're trying to do the best that we can to salvage what we have. And that, the variety of what we have in Minnesota for dairy farms, what you can tell Megan to do on her dairy, you can't tell Eric and I to do where we farm. So I think that is something regarding water too that we have to think about. So back to our questions that were submitted. It was specifically about nitrogen and fertilizer or manure, and I don't know how much you guys work with this, but we were asked, how can nitrogen content in manure be more accurately estimated in order to reduce nitrogen fertilizer applications in cornfields that are receiving manure? Do any of you have experience in that?
I think I alluded to like what we're looking at trying to do would be it's called constituent nutrient.
Sensor.
Yeah, that would be probably the thing that would allow you to maybe dial in a little bit. Because you take manure. We do manure sampling. You take manure sampling, but there's a difference when you can like do it in real time. It's pretty cool, right? So it's like real time analysis on all my cow data, right? So we can do some real time analysis on manure.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to what I said about you want that data. You're used to getting it from the cow, so you want that on the agronomy standpoint. But even when I soil sample, when I grid sample, I take a soil sample on every 2.5 acres. So that's like 2.5 football fields. And I will do 10 cores, which is like the standard of what you should take for a grid sample. Basically, I don't know, a 50-foot radius of my four-wheeler, which again is like more than what some people will do. And then they take 1 teaspoon. I get about 2 cups of dirt. And when they take that test, they will take 1 teaspoon of soil and do an analysis on that. And that is what you apply. That is the information that you apply to 2.5 acres. And that is kind of the industry standard. And so just like the manure, when we test our manure, we send in 2 cups of manure on a 1 million gallon lagoon. And so the real-time information, that real-time data is huge, but then you have to be able to apply that. I'm assuming that you can probably import your soil results into that program so that it is applying correctly, which then gets very complicated, especially in our area, because we cannot fall apply nitrogen. All of our nitrogen is spring applied, or it won't stay there because of our unique soil structure. So you can't really variable rate your fertilizer based on nitrogen content. So it just gets very complicated, but having that real-time information is, especially when you're used to it with the cows, you want it in the other side.
No, it'd be cool if you could get it out of the soil as you drove over it, right? That'd be sweet. Develop that. Who in here is doing stuff? Get that on board.
Well, there is
that could be a retirement
things,
account.
Too. There is a Veris cart, and I don't know exactly how it works, but you drive over the field and you collect information that way and make maps that way.
Yeah, but put it on your tractor as you're planting corn or something. Scan the soil.
Putting the manure on when you're putting the manure on.
I was just going to say, I don't know who asked that question, but when I talk to manure haulers, manure pumpers, custom crop people, they actually complain the other way that a lot of the University of Minnesota recommendations aren't high enough, because just like cows are different with how much they produce, corn genetics and soils are different with how much they produce. And they say we are being, kind of strangled here, depending on the soil type, depending on the year. we should be able to put on more nitrogen, and they can prove that it wouldn't run off, but they have to adhere by law in many situations to University of Minnesota recommendations. One of the biggest problems with that, back to Megan's point, alfalfa is this poor forgotten stepchild in all government programs. Dr. Melissa Wilson and our crops department here are working on updating alfalfa recommendations, but we don't give it the credit it deserves in nitrogen fixing, and we also give it too much credit at times. So anyway, there's the U of M recommendations. The MPCA forces farms to do that, and so the question was, how do we get farmers to put in less nitrogen? I would always say we should actually look at commercial fertilizer. The cows are going to produce the fertilizer, and our farmers are good at spreading that out appropriately if it's well valued. But if we can use that first and import less commercial fertilizer, that's what our bias would be.
I completely agree with Lucas from an agronomy standpoint. When I did my master's, I have my master's from Iowa State through agronomy, and their recommendations are significantly different than Minnesota. So 2 of the customers that I worked with have land in both states. They live on the Minnesota side. And so there can be some wiggle room if you're do it across your full farm. But depending on what the application is, we will go back and forth between Iowa State and University of Minnesota's recommendations. But also along that, just there's not really, you don't really have to keep track of your commercial fertilizer that you're applying to the field. So you can go put a dump truck load of urea down a sinkhole and nobody's gonna care or notice that you did that. But manure is nobody does that. This is a very hypothetical situation. But nobody is monitoring that either. And I mean, don't go start monitoring and regulating farmers based on my conversation. But a lot of people are looking at the dairy farmers. They're like, well, what are you doing with that very natural fertilizer? Let's be very specific with where you're putting it. But there isn't a lot of regulation on some of the stuff that is commercially applied. They don't want to do that because they want to, it's expensive. So they don't want to waste it. And so they're putting it where it needs to go. But there's also not any, they're not writing it all down necessarily other than for their own records.
And I think that's probably where the data can help us advocate as farmers for that that information to say, hey, we're planting these varieties of corn and it's actually pulling more nitrogen out of the soil than what we actually believe based on the recommendations for all of those things too. So there's a value added benefit for farmers to advocate for us. Any other questions? I have lots more, but we're gonna end at one.
Make a comment. I mean,
Yeah,
like what we're just
go ahead.
talking about here is like a classic, like, I'll just call it the need for a decision. Like, okay, there's an advocacy side of things, but there's a farmer decision support tool right there, right? Like, how do we better quantify the biological sources of nitrogen in our fields so that commercial fertilizer becomes more of a top dress and the afterthought versus I'm gonna buy my fertilizer, put that on, and then figure out if I get some manure or do a biologic or add my alfalfa credit from the previous year kind of deal.
Mhm.
So.
Just a real quick comment about the question about what carbon practices you're doing on farm, like avoided nitrogen or avoided synthetic fertilizer is already really good because there's so many greenhouse gases emitted. It consumes so much energy to manufacture synthetic nitrogen. So one might argue that avoided synthetic fertilizer application is a climate practice, but
I mean, straight up, almost any carbon calculator counts that as an avoidance credit.
That's a great point. I think one of the challenges that we specifically have is that you have to have for the amount of cows that we milk, you have to have a pretty large land base to be able to apply the manure. So neighbors are somewhat willing to take it, especially if it's drag lined, but they don't want to pay for it. They don't want to, they would rather pay for commercial fertilizer than pay for the trucking of the manure, basically. So that can be a challenge that we have.
We've had pretty good luck selling ours in our area, but I think it's taken a while. It's taken a long time to can't always lead the horse to water and make him drink, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think they're starting to see that. And I think this climate change conversation we've had in the last 5 years is really helping those conversations between dairy farmers and cash croppers.
I think that Megan had a really great point about the manure being the whole package, because when we're putting a value on our manure, people really only care about the phosphorus, the nitrogen, and the potassium that's in it, because that's the main commercial fertilizers that they're applying. But you're getting so much more than that with manure, and it's all the micronutrients that if a row crop farmer wants to apply micronutrients, then you're talking really big bucks. So they don't account for that in the manure, but it really truly is the whole package. And I always say that it's the reason that we can grow corn, because I feel like it makes our land just a little bit more forgiving with if we get out there when it's a little too wet, or my father-in-law didn't have the planter set quite the way I wanted him to, or whatever the case may be. It just makes it a little more forgiving, I feel.
Just to sort of like maybe a closing question, because you alluded to that climate change conversation. So can you speak maybe briefly to just like, what is the climate change conversation happening in your communities? Are you talking about it amongst yourself? Is it a point of conversation or not really?
I would say it's a point of conversation, kind of both tongue in cheek and seriousness. Like, they'd have people coming after our cows, but yet how many miles did Taylor Swift put on her jet flying to watch Travis Kelce this winter? So, I mean, that's what the tongue in cheek part is. But we also understand the methane aspect. I know that we've gotten data on how much more efficient cows have been. I know the University of Minnesota has been working on methane collection, because I helped bring some head stalls and stuff to one of the professors here. So we definitely see that conversation is happening and where it needs to go. But we also like, okay, so you're coming after us, but let's also look at the big picture here on things too at times. So, and that's because I just feel like farmers are realists and see a lot of sides of the same puzzle piece at times. So, but the conversations I feel are happening.
I agree. I think the conversations are happening, but I don't think they're happening in a very educated, informed kind of way. My son came home. So my son was in 5th grade last year, and he had a substitute teacher. And the substitute teacher was basically bashing animal agriculture. And he's grown up on a dairy farm. It's the only thing he knows. He's very, very proud of it. He feels like we do the right thing because that's what he's been raised to do. And he was telling me in such a way of like, you could see in his eyes that he was learning, and he needed me to answer that question in a way that he could feel confident about it and know that we really were the right thing, because here this person in authority is contradicting everything that he's ever learned. And you could just see like you could just see it in his eyes. And I told him, I said, invite her out to the farm. Like, just tell her to come, because that's all we can do. We can just show her what we do. I did have a conversation with the principal, and I told him, I said, my kid will stand up for what he knows is right and what he believes in. So how do we do that? How do we teach him to do that in a respectful way when he is talking to a teacher or somebody that he needs to also respect, some sort of authority figure? And I have heard of other more in the high school setting. My son hasn't quite got to the high school yet, but kids that come home and teachers that have maybe shared more than they should about their particular perspective. So I don't think that the conversation is very holistic, seeing both sides, and that can be a real challenge. And so I think really kind of like what we're doing today and what Midwest Dairy's goal, their whole goal is like getting our message out and sharing our story is really important, because farmers are such a small portion of the population. And I don't necessarily feel that way in my community, because my neighbor's a dairy farmer, and the guy down the road is a dairy farmer, and then these guys are crop farmers. So like, I live in a really agricultural world, so I don't feel like I always need to necessarily be sharing that, but we probably do more than we realize it. But it's getting farmers out in more urban centers so that they can share that message, and just so people have another perspective than what they're hearing from other places.
I would say I think we're definitely having the conversation, and it's probably within the industry. It's probably similar to what we're seeing within the general population as far as generational differences. A lot of young farmers, right? We're have a different mentality and a thought process. It's going to be a little bit different for us than it was for my dad's generation. So I think depending on the farm and the age of the owner, maybe there might be some different conversations. Or like for us, I'm a young farmer. We're looking at the next 20 years. We're probably having a different conversation than a dairy that's thinking that he's in his 50s or 60s and not continuing that legacy. So, but I think there's definitely conversation being had there, some great conversation within the industry, especially as we look up our chain into our processing and then with our buyers, especially. I know there's been a lot of commitments made within the industry and also within food companies, big, just in general, in companies in the United States. So I think that some of that conversation trickles back down to us as well. So, but I think the one challenge we have as an industry, even I would say just within our food system in the United States, is communicating how complex and how awesome it is with the general public. And communicating, because Eric will say that with his young kids of why he brings them to the farm. And we had that question about jobs and training with young people. People don't understand all of the interesting things that we do on the farm and like how much technology and how much data and how really sophisticated it is. And I think if we could convey that and really how creative we are at creating solutions to climate change or whatever it is, I think that would be a really awesome conversation. I think that we're kind of missing out on.
Well, I'm not topping that, so thank you, Megan. Thank you all for your time today, for your interest in being here and having this dialogue. Lisa's got a few details for some follow-up.
Again, just thanks everyone for attending and great questions. So we will plan on sending out a post survey. Might not get done tomorrow, but maybe Monday. To everyone who's here, we'd just love to get feedback. As you thought about some of the conversation today, maybe you have another question that you didn't ask, so you would like a little bit more information, if we missed something, and how this helped you in some of those conversations. So really want to thank our panelists for taking the time to come here, and I just, and for Sean to have the dialogue, because I think this is what we do. Great last question. Because I think this is what we have to do more of, and I think it is really important. So I'm excited and, to go forward and what else we can do. And any resources that you do need, because we will try to send, some resources. Do have little gift bags. Got a lot of poop emojis, so a little stress poop. Go ahead. So you gotta have fun, right? So thank you very much. There's a few extra. I know our farmers didn't get a chance to grab their lunch, but go ahead and take another beverage or a cup of coffee to go. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.